Okay, hello everyone. It's 35 past the hour, so I'm going to start with this webinar. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Samuel, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today and for your interest in both the project and the open call that we are currently running, and I assume that is the reason why you have joined us today, so thank you for that. If you don't mind, and for the sake of ensuring that the connection and the session goes as best as possible, we will keep video and cameras turned off. So basically, we'll just be running the presentation on screen. And as also, I've muted automatically everyone upon entry. So please do keep your microphones muted for the session. We'll be opening up the floor at the end of the presentation for any questions you may have. So in any case, there is the chat option. If you have anything immediate that you want to place, then feel free to do so. And also, we're recording this session so that we can make it available to both those that have joined us today and those that were not able to for any number of reasons. So let me introduce myself formally again. My name is Samuel, and I am with the F6S Network Limited. We are one of the partners that are running this open call along with the EGI Foundation and PSNC. We are three partners of the EOSC Digital Innovation Hub cooperation, which is part of the larger EOSC-hub project, which consists of more than 70 partners from all over Europe. So we are one of the larger projects funded by the European Commission, but we'll be providing a bit more information on that, on the EOSC-hub and EOSC Digital Innovation Hub in the next few slides. So in general, the objective of this webinar is to provide you with an understanding of what the project is and what are the services that are being provided and available through the project. Also, how this open call is providing an opportunity to get access to these services and how the open call itself works. And lastly, to provide an overview of some of the other pilots that have already benefited from the wide selection of EOSC Digital Innovation Hub services that are available. So in terms of the next slide, the agenda, so over the next 50, 60 minutes, we're going to address the items that I just mentioned. So we'll start with the presentation of the EOSC Digital Innovation Hub and the services available. We'll then jump to the open call, including who can apply, how to apply, and how the evaluation is carried out. After that, we'll go over some of the pilots, as I mentioned, including the 6 initial pilots that that started with the project itself and those that have joined in the meantime. And as I mentioned, we'll then open the floor to some questions and answers, and we'll try to the best of our knowledge, provide any information, any additional information that that is relevant to the question that you ask. So in terms of the speakers today, I'm Samuel, top left corner from F6S. Top right, we have Marcin from PSNC. He'll be speaking about the pilots, which he is responsible for managing. And on the bottom center, we have Sai from EGI. He is the coordinator of the EOSC Digital Innovation Hub, and he'll be providing you an overview of that component of the project. And that's it in terms of speakers. So having that in mind, once again, I want to thank everyone, and on behalf of all the partners, of course, I want to thank you again for your interest and availability to join us today. And I will now give the floor to Sai, and he will be presenting us the EOSC Digital Innovation Hub overview and some services. So thank you, Sai. The floor is yours.
Great. Well, thanks, Samuel, for helping to provide the underlying service to get this thing up and running. And thanks to all of the participants as well from my side for your interest in this. So as Samuel mentioned, my name is Sai Holsinger. I work at the EGI Foundation as my main employer, and we're one of the core partners. We coordinate the EOSC-hub project, which was provided the funding mechanism to basically set up this Digital Innovation Hub. So I am in charge of the Digital Innovation Hub itself, and we just thought it was worth spending a few minutes just to kind of give you a little bit more information into the context of where did this Digital Innovation Hub come from, what are our goals and activities, and maybe give you a little bit more idea of the services that we're talking about. So I imagine some of you have read documentation offline, but I'm sure you can only extract so much information. So it was worth to kind of spend a few minutes just to kind of give you a little bit more verbal and visual context. So next. So the EOSC-hub project, which is where this Digital Innovation Hub came from, it's an implementation project for a wider initiative that has been funded as kind of a vision from the European Commission for us to reduce the fragmentation of research and innovation activities that are happening across Europe and at the national level, and trying to pull them all together. So in order to implement this vision, they started with a few of the major e-infrastructure initiatives that had already been in operation for some time. So EGI Federation, us being one of the largest distributed or federated computing infrastructures in Europe. We are spread across more than 40 countries, and we federate more than 200 data centers across Europe, and then we peer with other infrastructures. And we're up over 70,000 individual users of our infrastructure. Then we have EUDAT, which is another European infrastructure that focuses on providing data management services. So as you can imagine, the wealth of data that's being produced in both the industry and in research becomes a challenge to be able to share that content and move that data around. And then Indigo Data Cloud, which is providing or supplying more cloud-related products and services in the development effort for us to then implement with inside of the infrastructure. So that provides like the baseline infrastructure service, but we've also brought in a number of major research infrastructures that are building dedicated services within individual scientific domains or industrial sectors that are building value-added services on top of the infrastructure. So it's not only the, let's say, infrastructure as a service, but it's also the added value services that are being built on top of them. Next slide. So here we are, we're running outreach and to industry. So then the question becomes the conceptual model around what is a digital innovation hub. So public-private partnerships have been going on for decades. This isn't new. The name was a way to provide some type of shared common understanding and provide a name by which then it become easier for different initiatives spread across Europe and at the national level to understand and communicate with each other. So the Digital Innovation Hub is now kind of this common understanding as a way where research and private industry, funding agencies, accelerators, can all kind of come together and create joint partnerships in order to stimulate innovation. So the European Commission has this vision to establish a network of different digital innovation hubs. So in order to kind of make sense of what digital innovation hubs were being put into place, they created a catalog for people to then register, and then they would review the content and approve and then publish them in a catalog. And there's more than 100 digital innovation hubs around. And for now, the majority of them seem to either be sector specific or they're location based. So they're either in a specific country or in a specific region or tackling a different sector. So what we would like to do with our Digital Innovation Hub is, one, provide a mechanism for anybody who would like to engage with the wider European Open Science Cloud. Conducting industrial related activities can come through our Digital Innovation Hub. And then we also have the vision to provide our sector agnostic services to other digital innovation hubs, as well as obviously individual startups, SMEs, and large industry. So next slide. So this is basically the outline of what we're doing is we're bringing in the spirit of the European Open Science Cloud to reduce fragmentation. We're also pulling together our different business engagement activities that have been happening within the individual infrastructures, so that if a company or an organization wants to access some services, they have a single point of contact in order to go into. This way you're not running between different infrastructure and having different conversations because you would like to access different types of services. So we're not only limited, but our focus is on startups and SMEs because we felt like they kind of get the best benefit out of these kind of pre-commercial joint development projects that we're running. So to date, we have at least 7 success stories, so individual pilots that have been run through our Digital Innovation Hub. We have another 4 that are ongoing and several others that are in the pipeline. And this open call is basically a mechanism for us to continuously onboard new pilots, and we have several other partnerships established. So yes, this Digital Innovation Hub was set up within the context of an EC-funded project, but our idea and all the measures we are put into place will be so that this Digital Innovation Hub lives beyond the life of the project, which right now is planned to end in December of this year. Next slide. So here's a few of the, let's say, the logos of the different partners that has driven this, but this is pretty much our mission. Bring private companies into the European Open Science Cloud by identifying concrete business cases. So we kicked this off in January of 2018. So basically we've been up and running for about 2 years. We have a number of different services that we offer, and that's another reason why it's quite important to have, let's say, a core set of partners that can kind of make this initial contact, do some requirements analysis, and then allow us to pick from the wealth of services that are available through the European Open Science Cloud, which is only growing by the day. But I'll give you a little snapshot of some of the services that we're talking about. Next slide. So here are just some of our objectives. So one of them is to provide access to the infrastructure resources so we can do some pilots and prototyping. We'd like to facilitate partnerships with other innovation clusters because we don't pretend to be the only ones on the market. And a lot of times smaller organizations have limited resources, they're in a local market, and they are looking to expand into either new areas, gain visibility or traction, and by partnering with European or international initiatives can kind of give that to them. We also have, through our partner F6S, provide business coaching as well. So basically at the end of the pilot, if you needed or wanted some support in terms of, oh, how can we take this new prototype or product to market, there's support for that. Trying to provide or facilitate access to fundings or grants or even participation in future projects. And then pilots are really designed to be short-term proof of concepts, 3 to 6 months, but we do have this kind of vision to then see what could our relationship be beyond any pilot, so developing long-term business relationships. Next slide. So here's just basically taking those objectives and trying to put them into somewhat of a digestible set of services or categories. So we do break them down as running piloting and co-design, technical access, training and support, and then visibility. So each one of these, I'll give you just a little bit more information before I pass back over to Samuel. So next slide. So piloting and co-design, this is what we really mean. We're in the kind of the pre-commercial aspects where you have an idea and you would like to run this, run the proof of concept. We do offer infrastructure as a service as well. So maybe if you have an existing PaaS or SaaS solution that you would like to integrate in the overall European Open Science Cloud ecosystem, doing co-development projects, so service and product design, providing with testing facilities, performance verification, really anything that you would like to do, we would try to provide some type of the underlying service to enable that. Next slide. So I mentioned there's we can identify some 40 services. The service catalog in the EOSC portal is growing by the day. So just to kind of give you some sense of the services that we're talking about is we do have compute services. So this can be various types of cloud solutions, high throughput solutions. We have high performance computing resources available thanks to our partners from Chineka and PSNC. We have a federated authentication and authorization systems that are put into place so that you can reuse existing authorization mechanisms and not have to identify your own. Some companies are basically building applications that they are reusing existing public data, so publicly available data such as data coming from satellites, and they're basically able to visually render those data and provide a consumer-facing service on top of that. So what data is available, access to that data, where is that data being stored? Then we have tools and applications. A lot of our added value services that are being put on top, most of them then make that available as open source or available to be reused. So here, just to try to give you the breadth of different sectors that are already operating with our infrastructure and basically being able to share those tools or applications that already exist on the market. And then, as I mentioned, through our partners, EUDAT, they offer a number of different data management services to be able to share share data, store data, move data around, provide secure data functions, and then have some type of storage facilities. Through one of our partners, we even have services for sensitive data, and this is typically for protection of personal information. Next. And then training and support, just to kind of augment the human services together with the technical services. So we have, there's a wealth of expertise in the research world. So we would basically identify, depending on the given expertise that you're looking for, we try to then reuse our partner network to find that expertise and then bring them together. So for an example, how could I cloudify my existing application? We also provide trainings in areas such as like service management, for an example. So how do you set up all of the individual processes and procedures to manage the service that you've just created? I already mentioned the business coaching and the brokerage to funding opportunities. And finally, next slide, is the visibility services. So this is basically, if you run a pilot with us, we take a description of that pilot, we put it up on our website. After the pilot is conducted, we try to then turn that into some type of article. We do have a success story publication that we put this on. We've offered opportunities for our pilots to present either in demo booths at our events or other industrial facilities. If you have a service that you would like to make available to the European Open Science Cloud community, then we help onboard that service into the marketplace so that it could be made available, discoverable, and then even orderable, and then just kind of join our overall network of experts so that you can start to kind of interact and engage with other actors, which then opens up additional opportunities. And not to take up most of the time, so my final slide here is just to say that we kind of launched our new website. Again, this is in our positioning to be ready post-project. So we have a dedicated website where we're trying to host the majority of information. We'll be continuously adding more information to the website. Would always like to hear any specific content that you would like to see, but this will be developed over the course of time. So if there's anything that you didn't get from here or didn't get a chance to ask, you can always visit the website or just contact us directly. So with that small little introduction, I'll stop there and pass over to Samuel, who can give you a little bit more information on how the open call works.
Right. Thank you very much, Sai, for your presentation and for providing, in a nutshell, what is a very complex but and useful, say, the service that DIH is providing. So we'll move on now to the open call, which is I'd say the main focus of the webinar today. And I'd jump in with the objectives of what we're actually looking for, and this is very much related to what Sai mentioned before. So we've had already a number of pilots ongoing, starting at the beginning of the project, and several others that have joined in the meantime, and we're looking to continuously bring on more other pilots from other sectors to increase the value and also the impact of the project itself. So in terms of specific objectives, what we can identify is, and out of this open call, we aim to have 5 new pilots and make available to them a selection of the different services that Sai just mentioned a couple of slides ago. Also to mobilize the participation of new entities. So what we mean by that is have different SMEs, startups, spin-offs, other competent centers, other eligible entities that you will see in a few slides involved in the project, not only allowing them to have some not only allowing them to collect some value from the project, but also bringing value to our project. And then of course, diversify the scope of sectors involved in the pilot activities. So as you'll be able to see if you go visit the site, and as you'll see further on through Marcin's presentation later on, we've already have some pilots focusing on, for example, sea, maritime. We have pilots from the sports area and furniture. So anything that we're happy to have pilots from these areas, but also we're looking for pilots that address other areas as well, other sectors in this case. So those are the objectives of this open call and why we decided to run a new opportunity to harvest pilots. So who can apply? Who are the eligible entities for the open call? So as I just mentioned, we're accepting in the open call entities such as startups and spin-offs, SMEs, large enterprises, digital innovation hubs, competence centers, and other innovation spaces. So applications can be submitted by a single entity. So you can either be an SME, for example, or you can be a small consortium of up to four entities, and in this case, each entity must be one of the listed types, the 6 bullet points, and from any sector. Okay, so it's not possible to have 3 SMEs in one university. That is not considered eligible. They must be 3 SMEs in a startup, 2 SMEs, 2 large enterprises in the case of consortium, maximum 4. And as Sai also mentioned, there is some added value in having startups, SMEs involved as pilots. So in the evaluation phase, if an applicant is an SME or involves startups or an SME, an extra advantage is added in the evaluation phase. So in terms of eligibility requirements, kind of things that we're looking for is that the pilot or the type of use case that is, submitted in the application must either be a pilot or proof of concept, service, product design, platform as a service, or software as a service, or focus on performance verification and or testing. Okay, so in terms of the solutions that are available, they have to focus on, or they must include those coming from technical access, which we've seen before, computing, storage, data management, research data, also from training support, technical consultancy, service management. So in the application itself, there is, and we'll see an image of that in a couple of slides, there's an opportunity to select the type of services that you're looking for or that you want to, let's say, make use of in your pilots. And these are examples of the type of services that are available, and that, of course, in the application phase, you have to justify what kind of use case you want and how these services are relevant to that use case in particular. So jump to the next slide, sorry. So what will you receive? And I think the most important thing that we make clear is that there is no actual cash payment to the applicants that are awarded. So there is no funding, direct funding provided. Rather, awarded applicants are going to be provided in the semi-voucher system up to 10,000 euros worth of services. So different services we've seen have, let's say, specific costs associated to them. And then basically you have access to 10,000 euros worth of services in your use case. Okay, so that's basically what is guaranteed to an awarded applicant, in addition to, for example, all the visibility related aspects that Sai previously mentioned. So if you're awarded, if your application is awarded and you go into the implementation phase, of course, you get everything visibility related to, and that includes, being highlighted in our publications, the possibility of presenting in larger EOSC-hub events and so forth. So these are guaranteed, let's say, benefits that are available to the awarded applicants. In addition to that, there are also a number of key services that are provided, and that includes access to infrastructure resources and other technical services, several of which have been presented before. There's expertise and support on prototyping, scaling up, design, performance verification, and demonstration. So these are competencies and areas of expertise that the partners involved can provide to the awarded applicants and those that move forward with the implementation of their use case. We'll be able to provide and facilitate partnerships with SMEs in industry, innovation clusters and accelerators, business coaching and training. And for example, that's something that F-Success, which I'm work for, will be, let's say, responsible for. If this is something that you need, of course, and you identify as being a part of your use case. And then, of course, the visibility aspect again. And that's just how can I put this? Is just a summary of the number of benefits received. So I think it's important to emphasize again, because many open calls provide direct payment. This is not exactly the case, but the services are provided and the value is provided through a voucher in up to 10,000 euros. So in terms of open call structure, we're currently in the launch phase, phase 1, which is running for about a month now. It started on April 2nd, will run until May the 3rd, 17 CEST, and that's when the application phase deadline is. So basically now today we have this webinar, and the objective is to basically provide an overview of the open call and how it works. So on May the 3rd, this phase comes to an end, and then we move into phase number 2, which is the evaluation and agreement phase, which I'll explain in a few slides. So basically all the applications received are going to be checked against a couple of eligibility criteria. Those that are not eligible will receive a rejection letter. Those that are eligible, all applications then move into the evaluation phase, which consists of a remote evaluation as well as an interview evaluation. And then the 5 applications with the highest score, because we're looking for 5 pilots, of course, and then proceed to the signing of an agreement and then the implementation of the pilot itself. And that will last, so that's phase number 3, and that will last anywhere between 3 to 6 months. So we're looking for basically up until November would be the latest for the implementation. And then the awarded applicants basically proceed with their pilot, their use case, according to what was signed in the service level agreement. So what you proposed in your application and what was in fact signed and the services that were agreed to be provided. So lastly, phase 4, and this comes mainly in December, then the pilots will be required to report to the team basically what kind of activities you carried out in your pilot, what kind of impact you felt, what kind of impact your pilot had, not only on the partners, but also on in terms of impact for the project itself. And then we also discuss what kind of promotional activities can be agreed between not only the EOSC DIH team, but also the applicants. So in terms of submission and the selection process, right now, all applications are done via the F6S platform, as I mentioned. Then these are checked against the different eligibility criteria. If the application is eligible, then it goes into evaluation. If not, it receives a rejection letter. So basically the no and then rejection. And the applications that are eligible then go into the internal evaluation. As I mentioned, they're scored against a number of different criteria, which we will see. They are also evaluated remotely, so there is a remote interview, basically as a conference call for about half an hour, where we will discuss, where the applicants are invited to present their application in a bit more detail according to a number of different criteria. And then based on that, there's a final ranking and selection. Those that meet the evaluation thresholds are going to the service level agreement signature phase. Those that do not meet the evaluation then receive a rejection letter. And then basically after that, there's implementation and reporting, which I just mentioned. So in terms of submission process, as I mentioned just now, all applications must be submitted exclusively through the F6S platform. So if you do not have the lead entity, if it's a consortium, or the single entity, if it's just one submitting, must register on the F6S platform to be able to submit their application. So just a couple of, in terms of the second point of proposal preparation, these are just a couple of guidelines to keep in mind. So it is important to be specific and concise, of course. There are each field for each of the 4 criteria that we will see has a maximum number of characters defined. So it might be recommended, we can recommend basically to prepare something in a Word document or another text editor, and then copy that into the application field, so you do have an idea of how many characters you're using. There is an open call guide available on the EOSC Digital Innovation Hub platform website, which you can download and then see in more detail all of the regulation process and how everything with the open call is implemented. So as in many other applications, those of you that have prepared applications before, it is more than recommended that you submit before the deadline. If there is, if you do identify an error, before that and you have already submitted, you can request to make an update to your application. However, if you do not manage to submit your application before the deadline, anything related to, for example, network issues, those are not, let's say, considered as a justification for not having submitted your application on time. Okay, so there are circumstances where we can accept again your application if you have submitted on time, but anything submitted afterwards is not accepted. So in terms of eligibility, what do we check for in the first stage? So basically, we do a quick check to make sure that all entities, if in the case of one entity or in the case of a consortium, that they are one of the 6 types of entities that we've identified before. So startup, spin-off, all the way up to Digital Innovation Hub again. And then we also make sure that the type of use case being developed are one of the types listed here. So a pilot, proof of concept, service, product, platform as a service, or software as a service, for example. Those are the, let's say, the major criteria that we look for to make a first cutoff, and also that all applications are written in English. So this is mandatory. Anything that falls outside of these initial norms, we consider non-eligible, and then the applicants receive immediately a rejection letter with the justification of why they are not eligible. So once this first process is done, then we move on to the evaluation of the applications. And there are 4 criteria that we consider in the evaluation process. The first of which is the concept of the pilots, or the use case. So basically, what does the use case, the pilot, entail? What are the objectives? How feasible it is? And what is the novelty of what is being proposed. Secondly, the services and support. So basically, what services have you selected, how these fit into the larger picture of the use case, the pilot, how you will take advantage of the services that are being made available, what kind of impact that is going to have. So that jumps into the third criteria, the impact itself. So we're looking for use cases, pilots that have a clear economic and societal impact, just as any European Commission funded a project would have. So as the pilots that we are supporting are let's say framed within a larger European project, it is important that they themselves have economic and societal impact, that they also have some kind of market potential, a European dimension, so a benefit for Europe as a whole, and also that there is some kind of cross-sector and border business scalability. So what you're doing does have the potential to scale up and not just be kept within, let's say, not be limited to the scope of the actual pilot activity, but have the potential to grow. And then also that it has that you put forth a clear exploitation strategy and business plan, as well as with commercial milestones. So basically, you pose that, okay, we're starting with the pilot here, and that we expect to expand to a certain point in the future. We see this pilot, this use case, as being able to reach a market level in one way or another. So we're looking for something with a significant impact here. And lastly, we evaluate the applicant and the consortium. So what kind of capacity you have to perform the task, what past experience you have and knowledge, what technological and business expertise, and also the commitment. So these are the main criteria that we're looking for. Each of them is scored between 1 and 10. Half points are not given. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning, there are a number of advantage criteria, okay? So basically what we're looking for is, the following are considered to be an advantage in your application. So as I mentioned before, and as we'll see in a couple of slides when Marcin presents the different pilots that are ongoing and the success stories, any sector that is covered, or any application that covers a sector that hasn't already been included in the ongoing and finalized project is an advantage. So you will get 1 extra point in criterion 1. So if you're requesting 1 or more services from the technical asset services other than HPC and cloud computing, which normally are the most common, then you will also get an extra point for criteria 2. As I mentioned before, being a startup spin-off in a creation phase, let's say, or an SME also gives an extra point for criteria 4, so related to the applicant consortium. Although this is not limited in scope to the European Union and its member states, if you are an applicant in such a situation, then that gives an extra point for criteria 4. And then lastly, the last advantage criteria is if the applicant or the applying entities are part of startup or spin-off programs, or located as part of a startup ecosystems or hubs. So these are all advantage criteria. No more than 3 extra points will be awarded. So we have 5 points here, but at most you get 3. And to note that no criteria will be scored more than 10 points. So even if you have a fantastic concept or fantastic services, you are also an SME, a member state, or addressing a sector complementary to those that are already covered by the pilots, you will not get more than the 10 points. So don't expect to receive, in this case, 13 points for having a fantastic concept and addressing additional advantage criteria. Okay. Moving on to the next slide. So I want to briefly present here through a set of images what the evaluation form looks like. So basically, to the left here on this first slide, we have we request that the applicants provide the name of the pilot, an acronym for the pilot, which is standard across European funded projects, an acronym, and a pilot title, as well as an abstract, which should not be more than 1,000 characters in size. So you can see in each of the boxes the size limit in terms of characters that each field should have. So to the right here, we have information about the applicants. So in the case of a single applicant, you provide your name, the type of entity, which is one of the 6 that is listed, as well as country. And this is basically just for statistical purposes that we have to provide to the European Commission. And then question number 7 here, in the case of a consortium, then you select how many additional partners you have, which can be 1, 2, or 3. For a consortium, up to 4 partners, of course. And then in that case, once you select that field, an automatically additional field opens up where you're requested to also provide the name of the additional entities, the countries, as well as the type of entities they are. Again, being either startup, an SME, large enterprise, etc. Okay. So then the next part of the application form is the actual description of the use case pilots, and that's broken, and those 4 criteria broken down into a number of different sub questions. The concept of the pilot then focuses on or asks about the pilot, its objectives, what makes it a novel use case. And also a second question related to how you expect to achieve the objectives of your pilot within the duration. So basically, if you're proposing a specific set of objectives, how you see that being feasible within the period of 3 to 6 months, which is let's say the maximum duration of the pilot. Then criteria C2, services and support. Here you indicate what are the different services that you think best match your pilot use case needs. And here, of course, you can select more than one, but it is important that you be able to justify well why these are the services that you need. Then the next point goes into impact. So here we have a number of different fields that address the socioeconomic impact, market potential, the exploitation, as well as dissemination. So these are points that I have mentioned previously. I hadn't mentioned the dissemination aspect, but that's also important. So not only are we available to support the awarded applicants with dissemination of their pilot or use case, whatever is most relevant in that case, but we also expect that that the applicants make an effort to disseminate the activities and also the project. So it's a mutual benefit in this case. And then lastly, the point on the applicant in the consortium description. So the capacity, experience, and knowledge of the applicant. So moving on in terms of evaluation, each criteria is scored from 1 to 10. Basically, following the criteria that you see listed here. It is important to note that the minimum qualifying is 6 points for each item. So we have to consider it to be that each criteria is good for the, let's say, to continue the evaluation process. And the overall score threshold, or the minimum points that the sum of all 4 criteria must have, is 25. Okay, so so even if you have an excellent consortium and you're awarded 10 points on that criteria, if your concept is evaluated poorly, 1, 2 points, or 3, 4, then you're automatically disqualified. So it is important to have a minimum of 6 points on each item for the evaluation process to continue. So then in terms of ranking remote interview, this is just a quick summary. Basically, after we evaluate all applicants, then we use the following rules to order them, where we give preference to the impact, then to the technology aspect and the concept. After which the top 10 ranked applications are invited to an interview, where we focus on the concept and services. with a weight of 30%, the impact weight of 30%, and then of course the team or the consortium, again, with a weight of 40%. Similarly to the other remote evaluation, there's a minimum minimum threshold of 6 points in each of these evaluation criteria. After which, after the remote evaluation is carried out, then we order the 5 ranked applications, and then we move forward with sending applicants the final acceptance or rejection letters. Okay, so almost wrapping up the open call. The agreement process basically is where we sign an agreement between the, sorry for the background noise, where we sign an agreement between the applicants and the team. And here applicants are requested to also take into consideration all the evaluation comments that were included in the evaluation report. And of course, we will look here to make sure that information related to the type of entities does add up. So if you indicate that you are an SME or a large enterprise, we will ask for some kind of proof that that is the case. We expect the agreement process to be concluded in 2 weeks. So basically by the end of May, we expect to have the evaluation and agreement process finalized so that the pilots can start as early as June. So if somewhere along this process there is some kind of lack of information being processed, the applicants can't provide information that is requested to them, then there is a certain time to do all of this information exchange. If there is a failure, then we will move on to the next, let's say, applicant in the reserve list. Okay. So then the pilot implementation, as I mentioned, is 3 to 6 months, starting in June, hopefully, running up until end of October, November. And there's also the need to identify and agree on a set of KPIs in the agreement, and that also helps measure the impact of the actual pilot and use case. And lastly, of course, there's the reporting, which is done after the implementation. You have applicants have 30 days to carry that out. We'll basically report on the activities that were carried out, the impact achieved, a review of the metrics and KPIs, information on the obstacles. So it's basically letting us know how everything worked out, any barriers that were faced, and that also gives us information and insight into how we can better carry out future pilots in additional projects. So lastly, again, just final notes, nothing that I haven't mentioned before. Submissions are made exclusively via the F6S platform. English is the official language, and all documentation, as when required, should be delivered in PDF format. So that is, in a nutshell, the open call. I know it is a lot to take in the course of an hour webinar, so please let us know if you have any questions. Of course, all the information is available on the EOSC Digital Innovation Hub website in the application material, the guidelines, and so forth. There are emails that can be sent, so please do get in touch with us if you have any questions. So I will now pass on the floor to Marcin, who will present the ongoing pilots examples before we take some questions on what we've presented today. So Marcin.
Okay, Samuel, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me very well. My name is Marcin Płóciennik, and I'm leading the business pilots, ongoing pilots in EOSC DIH. Okay, next slide, please. So we have an initial 6 pilots that we have started together with the project, and these pilots are coming from different sectors, different disciplines, and as you can see, these are from sport area, the analytics in the furniture area, up to more scientific parts on cyber hub or the seaport. Can you please, next slide? And next, and next, and next. Okay. You could see that these are the different examples, and it proves we are agnostic from domain perspective. Can you please go next slide? Since after the initial phase, we have onboarded next 5 pilots, again from different domains. And these are the examples of more advanced services also than the initial 6. And some of them are being onboarded together with our partner, thanks to our partnerships with other projects like DEEP. And some of those onboarded pilots are a well-known company, right, like BBC. Okay, next slide, please. So giving an example, going more in details into one of such, two of such examples. One is the example of the furniture enterprise analytics by DataFern. So their idea was to analyze the social media to check the trends in the furniture domain and sell this information for furniture manufacturer. Please, next slide. Basically, what they have done is they have implemented intuitive dashboard for domain expert, and where they were doing different comparisons in time, both in time and in content, and it helped better understanding on the trends in the furniture. Can you go on the next slide? Okay, that's how this looks like. The platform, several dashboards that were presented to final client. And next slide. Okay, and how look like the engagement with the EOSC? As you can see, the architecture of this solution was based on several layers and components. And basically what we helped as DIH was to cloudify all the solution. And also we help them with the expertise and support how to scale out and how to handle the users, additional data, and how to apply it to different sectors. So that's one of the example of engagement with us. And they were provided also with the resources to run the platform. Next slide. Okay, another example is CyberHub, and that's they are addressing proliferation of toxic microalgae. So basically, they have the sensors deployed in lakes and inland water, and they combine usage of the data from satellites and the use of big data, computational modeling, and data lifecycle management. Next slide. So basically, this is the example of how the company have built own new solution based on different EOS components that we help them to compose and integrate together with their algorithms and also knowledge and their domain specific data. So as you see, most of those components are the one coming from a catalog of the EOSC. Okay, next slide. And there was for them clear benefits of usage of those components for their product, and in general of usage of cloud for this specific use case. Next slide, please. Okay, and that's I think the final slide. That maybe Sai, you want to say the final word?
Yeah, so I think this is just kind of the final message is why collaborate with such a public funded organizations or with the research institutes. And really what it kind of comes down to is we're trying to offer basically the added value services that you wouldn't necessarily that you could get with a credit card, because basically if you know how to run the machines, you can get access to machines and you can pay for machines, then we're not necessarily the area for you. But if you're trying to do innovative things and you would like to share the expertise and work together to try to test pre-commercial projects and take advantage of the infrastructure services, the higher level services, the research data that really the public institutions really want to expand the usage of, and this does include startups and SMEs and industry. So this is what we really would like to kind of stimulate and send the message, is that we are open and willing to share as many services as possible, share the expertise in order to create something new. It's really to stimulate innovation. And that's really the idea here is, and we provide a single access point to that wealth of information. So we try to make some sense of what is available out there, so that you don't have to spend hours and days and time resources that you don't have to find the information. And then kind of bring out your local existing product into the wider vision and knowledge, so that you can start to participate. Obviously, we have rules of participation that applies to everybody within the European Open Science Cloud, which includes the research institutes, et cetera, then how they participate. So industry would just have to basically play by whatever those rules are. So yeah, and the final one is that we do work with other innovation hubs, because there's that objective to kind of collaborate with other innovation hubs. So yeah, we're running this open call to identify new business pilots that can run, but this isn't the only thing that you guys are doing. So if you're in fact already engaged in other initiatives that are happening, we would definitely like to hear about those, and then try to see on what other additional partnerships that we could create. So our relationship doesn't need to be limited to the individual pilot that ends up getting selected and run. So I think that's pretty much the last message that we have. In the few minutes, we would really like to take any questions that you have. So.
Yes, thank you both, Marcin and Sai, again for presenting the pilots and for the concluding notes. So as Sai just mentioned, we are open to, we do still have some time for any questions you have. So we can either use the chat or, you can open your microphone, and then if you have any questions, then we're more than happy to try and give you an answer to that. So I open the floor to any questions from any of our participants today. Maybe not.
Yeah, hello, you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Yeah, hello. Well, previously in one of the slides, it shows that the information must be presented through a PDF. But yes, through the system, when I did it, I didn't see any place where I could upload a PDF, neither than just putting the information right away into the system. So I don't really understand that part.
Yes. Let me clarify. So basically, the full application and what matters for this initial process is what is submitted through the F6S platform. So the different fields in the application form. What we meant, and I apologize for not having made that clear, what is meant by the PDF format is anything else that is then requested if the applicant, if your let's say application is selected and you move forward to the agreement phase, then anything that we might ask to either prove that you are an SME or one of the different types of entities, or any other type of information that we ask in that case, then we request that information be provided in PDF format. So in the let's say in first evaluation and the first application phase, it's exclusively done via the application platform. No documents are expected to be uploaded at that time. So only afterwards will we ask for anything, and that's when PDFs are expected, just to ensure that the documentation is readable, and we don't have any problems with sharing Word documents or in any other formats. So I hope that was clear.
Yeah, pretty good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if nobody have any other question, I would like to continue to answer
Yes,
question.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah, the examples of the previous projects that you have already selected, it seems to be very technical, like, and mostly I see them very directly to investigations. So I would like to know if that's something that you are looking for more, like, okay, these are investigation projects, or in general, like, you accept all the projects equally?
From my perspective, I think we're looking for, it's all about what you propose in terms of a project concept. So it's not necessarily, I think, from a research and development perspective, but it depends on what you have.
I can add two sentences here, which is, no, there's no, like, you don't get increased points for being at different maturity levels. In fact, that's, I mean, for the sake of time, that was one of the things that we couldn't dive into, which was, we do have the numbers, but if you look at basically those individual pilots, they all started at different maturity levels. At sometimes people use the technology readiness levels, the TRLs, as a way to try to identify it. But I mean, plainly speaking, some of them came with an idea and they wanted to develop a prototype. One had a prototype and they wanted to see if it would scale. And we've had others that were basically super close to going to market, that they were already in kind of like an early adopter phase, where they wanted to kind of get people to test what they had in order to make the final bits. So yeah, we've covered them all over the spectrum. But definitely they're technical because most of them need to use some type of technologies in order to facilitate them. But yeah, we've seen them across the board, and we're happy to kind of support wherever you are in your individual stage. What we want to make sure is that you have a clear objective on what you actually want to see happen at the end, and then we support that eventual objective. I hope that's kind of clear.
Yeah, it was pretty clear. Okay, so yeah, moving on to my next question. I don't know if anybody else have any question to ask, but if nobody does, I'm going to.
You can always use the raise your hand if you want to put yourself in the queue as well. So just in case anybody's waiting to jump in, you just raise your hand and then we'll call on you as well. So go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so the next question is, in case like any project that's selected, during the implementation process, is it necessary for the person or the group or the project managers in general to be where you are, or everything is going to be done from every place? Like, for example, right now I'm in Spain, so if my project is selected, am I required to move there, like to make an encounter directly with you, or how is it going to move?
I think, Sai, maybe you might be best.
Yeah, was the question to make a contract? Is that what I understood? Or
I think it's in terms of implementation, if there's any requirements of moving.
In terms of implementation, generally, like, is it necessary for the person or the group or the project, the people who are managing the project, who present the project, to be there personally with you?
Okay, I got you. So almost like the majority of all existing pilots have been run remotely. There could have been an idea that if we wanted to kind of schedule a face-to-face meeting to have discussions, we were kind of all open to that. But with the current state of affairs, I guess we'll be quite limited in being able to meet up face to face. So yeah, so everything's basically just done remotely. So we set up individual meetings, technical meetings, support meetings, planning meetings. However we organize the individual pilots, it'll be all remotely for the foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions that we may have from the remaining participants? know, please feel free. You should be able to either use the chat or unmute yourself. No, maybe not. Okay.
I think the last slide has our contact details. So yeah, if something comes to your head afterwards or you have anything, please do not hesitate to write us at our email. We like to use that email because that means a couple of us can pick up the email. So if anything comes there, please feel free to send us an email.
Okay, I'm going to launch my last question. For the previous years, how many applicants did you get, just to make an idea of what, how many people we are going to be, or how many projects are included?
So we only ran it in a kind of a sort of open call. This was prior to the project being funded. So when we say the initial 6 business pilots, this is because we wanted to bring those into the project in order to kind of get up and running immediately. So we ran a kind of a pre-open call prior to the project getting started. And then we ended up having enough budget to support 6. And at that time we had gotten 30 applications. So we picked 6 out of those 30. Most likely, and then we haven't run an open call. We basically started with those 6, then the other 5 just kind of came in organically from various contacts that we had, people contacting us, or just our general marketing activities. But I am expecting probably a similar number. So it won't be in the hundreds, but it won't be in the 5s. I also think that this is because we're not offering actual funding, but just more like in-kind support of services and time. So I'm guessing that's also going to limit the number of applications as well. So I hope that gives you at least a rough estimate of what our expectations are.
Okay.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your questions.
Yeah, those were great.
Okay, so I'm giving the last 10 seconds for anyone to raise their hand or open up their mic. If not, as I mentioned, contacts are listed on this last slide. We will make the slides available as well as the recording on the EOSC DIH website under the open call, let's say, page. And we'll also put them on and disseminate that to our Twitter and LinkedIn accounts as well. So this information will be made available to everyone. Again, do contact us if you have any questions regarding the application process or any other doubts about the project. We are more than happy to help you with that. And we are very grateful for your participation today. We hope that you were able to get some new information about the project, a better understanding of how the open call works. And we do hope that you're able to, if you haven't already, we hope that we receive your application to the open call, and hopefully we get the opportunity to work with you in the next couple of weeks. So again, on behalf of all of the partners that presented today, thank you very much for joining us, and stay safe. And thank you again. Bye-bye.